Yes, I'm finally making a video about working with Loki and Hell. This video seems like such a no-brainer with as much as Loki is involved in my practice. I've probably made more TikTok skits having to do with Loki than any other deity, but there's so much to say about him, and trying to think of, okay, how do I narrow this down to the kind of bare bones information so this video isn't 4 hours long? And I think I've achieved that. I also want to I also want to say I tried to make this video a few years ago. Not a few years ago, a couple years ago. Uh I'll put a timestamp of when it was. But anyway, and then as I was looking for other sources, Ocean Keltoy posted his video on Loki, and I'm like, this is too brilliant. I can't even compete. But his video is more so analyzing the mythology of Loki and why he is so controversial, which we will get into a little bit in this video. But if you want quite possibly the greatest video on Loki in terms of like Norse mythology and analyzing him, go watch Ocean's video. I'll link it below. I don't know him, he doesn't know me. I just genuinely think that it is brilliant, so I will put it in the description. I am going to discuss Loki's myth. Of course, you kind of have to when you discuss working with a deity, and of course, Lady Hell's as well. But before we fully dive into this in terms of like working with them, their mythology, what have you, if you want to know more about working with deities in general, I have written a Deity Work 101 guide called Gods of the Witches, which is available to everyone. And the reason why I specify that is because it is technically on my Patreon, but you do not have to be subscribed in order to get it. It's available to everyone. Now, if you have an Apple device, it will try to charge you more, which is dumb. It's to like pay for App Store fees or something. So just be sure to read the product description, and then that will help you to get around that so you don't get charged extra, because that's dumb. It's pretty short. It's only like 40 pages, the written version. There's also an audio version where I read the whole thing to you, so you can get one or the other. You can get both. So if you're interested in deity worship, deity work through a pagan lens, but you don't quite know where to start, how do I know if a deity is approaching me? How do I approach them? How does offerings work? How do I do more research on this topic? I've got you, and that will also be linked in the description. Now let's get into talking about Loki and Hell. Here's the tea. In the future, I probably will make more videos on the rest of Loki's family. It's just that right now I only work with Loki and Hell, but through divination, meditation, channeling, what have you, for one thing, I have concluded that Loki is a permanent member of my practice. He is here to stay. But Lady Hell is not permanent. She'll be with me probably for this next year, and I have basically been told that I'm going to be cycling through Loki's entire family throughout my life. So Jormungandr, or Yormi the Stormy Wormy, is next. And we'll go from there. So it's going to be a while. It's going to be in the future. I don't want to make videos about deities that I don't work with. My podcast, I have done a couple episodes on deities that I don't work with, but that's more so for educational value, not so much here's how to work with them, which is what I kind of want my YouTube channel to be a bit more about. So balance. So as I cycle through Loki's family a bit more, maybe I'll make more videos about them in the future, but for right now, we're sticking with Loki and Hell. First of all, who is Loki and who is Hell? Drop all preconceived notions from the Marvel universe from your mind. Nothing against it. Tom Hiddleston is lovely. But just drop it for now. There are many different types of Norse gods or beings, but for now we're going to stick with the Jotun and the Aesir. The Aesir are the primary and like top gods of the Norse pantheon, whereas the Jotun are a race of giants. Not really giants though, they're just like kind of tall. There are giants, but the Jotun, they're giants, but not. Loki is half Aesir and half Jotun. I believe his mother was Aesir and his father was a Jotun. Certain myths indicate that Loki is blood brothers with Odin, which does not mean that they have the same parents, but it is believed that they conducted some kind of ritual, like the blood rituals where you do this or something along those lines, so they are very deeply connected to each other. Loki also has two wives, Sigyn and Angrboda, or sometimes pronounced Angerbotha. And this is kind of where we get into some UPG territory, and I went into UPG in my Deity Work 101 video and in the Deity Work Guide, but you guys hear that train going by? Hopefully my microphone is blocking that out. UPG stands for Unverified Personal Gnosis, which is basically things that you experience in your own practice that are not necessarily documented in myth. So for example, the idea that Lady Hell enjoys moldy fruit as an offering is stated nowhere in the mythology, but is something that a lot of her devotees agree with. That would be an example of a UPG. So the general consensus among a lot of practitioners is that Loki loves both of his wives, but they had very different roles. Angrboda was a Jotun that Loki supposedly was married to in secret, whereas the rest of the Aesir were aware of his wife Sigyn, who was also one of the Aesir and was the goddess of loyalty. And some people say that while Loki does love Sigyn, part of the reason why he married her was in order to kind of fit in with the rest of the Aesir, and especially so that they wouldn't find out about Angrboda and the children that Loki has with her, Lady Hel being one of them. Hel is the oldest of the children. To my knowledge, to our knowledge, Norse myth is a little finicky. But Hel is the oldest, and it is said that from birth she is half dead, half alive. And artistic depictions depict her in different ways. The myth describes her in different ways. Some say that she is split half and half, like one side is dead, one side is alive. Some say it's top to bottom, half and half. Some depict her as like Emily from Corpse Bride, like just a little bit of everything. Loki then has two other children with Angrboda, Fenrir and the Jormungandr. Actually, it's like Fenrir, but I have a hard time saying that, so it's Fenrir. I'm sorry, I know that's not right. And then he also has two children with Sigyn, Nari, and Vali. Oh, and how could we forget Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse who Loki actually gave birth to. Yes, Loki is a mother as well as a father. So it is said that the Aesir knew about Nari and Vali, as well as Sleipnir, but did not know about the others. And when they did find out, they became very fearful because of the other children's monstrous nature. Fenrir was actually a puppy when all of the children were first discovered, but they can kind of tell, like, this is gonna grow into a kind of big bad wolf. I'm gonna be a little cautious of this. So they basically banished all of Loki's children because they were different, they were scary. So Fenrir was tied to a tree with these magical chains that he couldn't break free from. I actually think they tricked him into being bound. The Jormungandr was thrown into the ocean, and Lady Hel, perhaps, some people say that Odin maybe took pity on her because she was just a little girl, or she was the least scary of the bunch, but she was actually given a domain to rule over, the realm of the dead, Helheim. Now, there are various different afterlives within Norse mythology, for example, Valhalla, but that afterlife is where you go to if you are a warrior who died in battle. Now, I have been asked before, what about metaphorical battles? Like if you're battling with an illness, do you get to go to Valhalla for that? And it is generally agreed upon that no, if you die an ordinary death, you go to Helheim. Now, Helheim is the least favored of the Norse afterlives, but it's not like hellfire and brimstone or a bad, torturous afterlife that you might hear about from, say, Christianity. It just kind of is. some say it almost like mirrors life on Earth. You know, you have a house, you just kind of go about your day. You're just kind of there. Lady Hell is said to be very hospitable. She provides the people in her realm with gifts and lodging and hospitality, but it's not this like ultimate paradise with all of the meat and mutton you could possibly want, like what is depicted in Valhalla. Throughout the various myths, Loki gets into trouble a lot. But the thing is, in most instances, he takes accountability for his actions and does his best to fix it, which he will very much encourage you to do when you are working with him. But there are a handful of instances which go too far. These include the killing of Balder and the Locasenna, which is what I'll focus on in this video, even though there's several others. Again, go watch Ocean's video. So, the chronological order of some of these myths is up for debate. It's important to note that we do not have access to original Norse myth. The myth that we do have is reinterpretations of Norse myth that were written by a lot of Christian authors. So this is where we say don't take mythology literally and really drive that point home, because a lot of the literature is very Christianized. But like I said, the chronological order of events is a little murky, but some people believe that Loki's children with Angrboda were banished, and we actually don't really know what happens to her, if she was also banished or what went on there. But a lot of people believe that that's why Loki was pissed and did what he did to Balder. So basically, Balder was one of the most beloved gods of the Aesir. So much so that his mother made it so that he was essentially immortal, because the gods are stronger than humans, but in Norse myth they're not fully immortal. But it was made so that absolutely nothing in the universe could bring harm to Balder. However, there was one exception. The plant mistletoe was not made to swear this oath to not harm Balder because it was too young. So Loki has this vendetta against the Aesir, right? So what he does is he finds some mistletoe and fashions a weapon out of it. Some say that he attached it to the head of an arrow. Meanwhile, the gods were having fun with the fact that Balder was now pretty much indestructible. And they were playing a game where they were just throwing shit at him and watching as it just bounced off of him and did nothing to him. Meanwhile, there was a blind god named Hod, and Loki approached him and was like, "Hey buddy, you can't really play this game with everyone because you're blind. That's kind of ableist. That's not fair. Why don't I help you play the game with everyone?" So they get up, they walk over to where everyone was playing this game, and Loki helps Hod shoot this bow that no one knows has mistletoe on it. They shoot it, and Balder falls down dead immediately. They then send one of the other gods to Helheim, where Balder was now trapped, to try and plead with Hel to let him go. And she says, if everything in the universe weeps for Balder, then I will let him go and he can come back to life. So the Aesir go far and wide trying to get everything in the universe to weep for Balder. There is one maiden who refuses and says, let Hel keep what she has. And it is believed that this maiden was Loki in disguise. Then there's the Locasenna. Basically in this story, the gods are having a big banquet, they're having a party, they're pissed at Loki again and didn't invite him. Well, Loki strides on in and is like, hey, blood brother Odin, we made an oath, so you need to let me partake. And Odin's like, you know what? You're right. Pour him a glass. Loki is also pissed at the Aesir, because imagine if your friends just banished your kids like that. And he basically goes on a big old tirade against all of the gods. You, you're a bitch. I hate you, you. None of you are perfect. Y'all want to get mad at me, but you did this, and you did this, and you did that, and you, which they sir do not take kindly to. So what do? They kill Loki's other two children. Actually, what they do, so Nari and Vali are Loki's two children that he has with Sigyn. The gods turn Vali into a wolf who then mauls Nari to death. We don't know what happens to Vali after that, but it is presumed that he is killed. And then they tie Loki to a rock with Nari's entrails. I want you to think about that for a minute. And then, as if it couldn't get any worse than that, Loki's laying on this rock, and there's this giant venomous serpent just hanging above him, dripping venom down onto him. That is so painful that whenever it drips on him, he writhes in pain and causes earthquakes. We oftentimes in mythology see ancient people trying to explain natural phenomena that they didn't have the science or knowledge to explain at the time, so this was how the Norse people tried to explain earthquakes. Now, Sigyn, as the goddess of loyalty, of course, is loyal to her husband, and so she has a bowl that she holds above Loki to capture these drops of venom as they drip on him so that it won't hurt him. But the bowl will eventually get full, so she has to walk away and empty it, leaving the venom to drip directly on him. The earth shakes, she comes back and waits until the bowl fills up again, and the cycle just repeats. This is where we get into Ragnarok, which is sort of the Norse Armageddon. Now, some people believe that the ancient Norse people actually believed that this would happen, that this was their explanation for the end of the world, whereas other people view it as a story, a metaphor. Unfortunately, we can't go back 1,000 years and ask the ancient Norse people. At some point, we don't know when, why, or how, but Loki is freed from his binds. Now, some people say that Loki started Ragnarok, but it appears, and I gathered this because I watched Ocean's video before filming this one, it appears that that might not necessarily be the case. Ragnarok seems to just be something that happened, and Loki just happened to be on the side opposing the Aesir. But Loki is freed from his binds, and he goes to his daughter Hel, and she sides with him and her brothers Fenrir and Jormungandr, because they're also on this opposing the Aesir's side, understandably, because they were banished. And so Hel does not leave Helheim because that is her domain, but she provides Loki with an army of her dead, and then they all arrive on the battlefield on a ship made of fingernails. I don't know what that one's about, but and then they all fight to the death. But once it's all said and done, Balder and his wife then emerge from Helheim and basically start the world over, repopulate the world again. So it actually ended up kind of being a good thing that Balder was killed and sent to Helheim, because he was safe there while all of this was happening and was able to start everything over after Ragnarok. But still, I mean, gee, Loki caused all this chaos. There's several instances in which he gets the gods in trouble throughout his mythology, went on a whole you tangent. He kind of sounds like the bad guy here, but I ask you again, what if those were your kids? I just want you to contemplate that for a minute. But because of all of the trouble that Loki caused, he was essentially viewed as the Norse devil for a very long time. And I'd say really only in the last decade has become an acceptable mainstream pagan deity to worship. One of the biggest Norse pagan organizations in the US, if not the world, is called the Troth. Now, I'm not trying to bash this organization per se, as I think they do a lot more good than harm. And hey, If someone can acknowledge their mistakes and amend them, all right. And they provide a safe space for a lot of Norse pagans, so I don't necessarily want to put down the whole organization. But for a very long time, they kind of had this idea of, we don't care what you do at home, but at troth-sponsored events, the worship or veneration of Loki and anyone in his family is strictly forbidden. Except for Sigyn, because she was one of the Aesir. But the rest of them, nope. I believe in 2019, the Loki ban was lifted. So Loki was allowed to be venerated at troth-sponsored events. But his children and Angrboda, the children that he had with her, worshipping and venerating them was still forbidden until a couple years ago. Was it 2022? Something like that. They basically said, hey, we're not going to banish any deities anymore. Norse deities at a Norse pagan event. Like, they're all good. And yet, sometimes I'll be scrolling through Witch Talk and still see some anti-Loki sentiment, which, I'm sorry, is dumb. Because if you actually work with or interact with Loki or any member of his family, yes, they're chaotic, and yes, they can be tough. But they're still very loving and very much take care of their devotees. So let's get into that. What is it like to work with Loki and Hell? First, I want to talk about how they came into my practice. So, I was in college. It was my senior year of college, and it was right after I left home. If you know, you know. I had just finished working with the Morrigan. She was in my practice for like 5 minutes for a very specific thing that I was going through in my life. And then once I got through it, she was like, cool, you did it, see ya. I knew that Aries was going to be coming into my practice in the fall. This was summer-ish. I knew that he would be coming into my practice in the fall, so my original plan was to just take a breather for the summer. I was taking some summer school classes at school and managed to get emergency housing at my school because I needed somewhere to live. So I was obviously going through a very chaotic time in my life. And I had dormed at my school for all 4 years that I went there. Besides COVID, things got a little fishy there. But COVID aside, I had dormed at my school, and these dorms were very clean. I never saw any bugs, ever. Never had any problems. And we were right by a river. So usually when you're by water, you tend to see a lot of bugs. And pest control at my school was so good, never had an issue with them. Until I got the vibe that Loki wanted to be in my space. And I'm like, I can't right now. I'm just getting out of a really hard situation. Aries is gonna be coming into my practice soon, and you're freaking Loki. No. And just through divination, meditation, all that, I got the vibe of like, okay, I'll come back. Like 2 weeks later, I start singing flies, like your regular house flies, but like a bunch of them, just all on my screen door. That doesn't happen. Well, I'm like, I can't, not right now, please. It's like, okay, fine. 2 weeks later, big ol' spider in my bathroom. And I am afraid of spiders, of course. It's almost always the Lokians that are afraid of spiders. But the kicker was, it was right on the crack of my bathroom door, so I couldn't open the door. I couldn't get out to do anything about this, because my roommate at the time was not afraid of bugs. She was very, oh, just call me. I'll get a cup and put it outside. Fine by me. I couldn't do anything about it. Eventually he moved and my roommate was able to take care of it. But I just stood there hyperventilating for probably 5 minutes, but that's kind of a long time. In fact, that panic attack was so bad, he hasn't sent me a spider since. But that was what made me finally go, okay, fine. Fine. Well, it's common to see a lot of like funny skits about Loki doing something humorous on Witch Talk, which is totally fine, by the way. It's important to acknowledge that Loki's story is really traumatic. Because of that, he tends to gravitate towards people with trauma. Right. He is also canonically queer. If you're in on the Marvel universe, you might see you might see that Loki in the MCU is canon gender fluid. And that is because he is that way within the myth as well. There are plenty of instances in which Loki shapeshifts into a woman or a female horse in the myth where we get Sleipnir. So because of that, some people refer to Loki with they, them pronouns, or if you are working with Loki's specifically feminine aspect, you might say she and call her Lady Loki. In my experience, he really doesn't care what pronouns you call him. But as he grows and grows in popularity and is just developing this army, this harem of traumatized queers to be his devotees, there's a pattern. Now, how did I come to the conclusion that he would be with me for life? Well, as I was integrating him into my practice, I learned that his sacred number is 8. My birthday is August 8th, and because I was born in 2000, I turned 8 on 8808. So there's just a lot of 8s having to do with me. I'm a Leo, that's a fire sign. He's heavily associated with fire. So those types of things, I was just like, did some divination, and Loki was like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Now, I am a Christo-pagan witch, which means, like, I incorporate the Christian pantheon into my practice as well, and identify as a Christian witch, mainly because, like, the Christian pantheon is my, like, primary source of magical yes. So then how does that work? Listen, guys, I don't know. If you have no context for this, you're going to be very confused, but I promise it's true. Another UPG. Loki and Jesus are besties. I know, it's like, what? Any Christian witch will tell you, any Christo-pagan, really any Norse pagan, whether there's someone who works with Loki and Jesus, or they work one but not the other, like that. I've talked to so many people who were like, yeah, they are BFFs. Not every deity is going to be best friends with each other. When it comes to Jesus, I mean, I have never had a bad experience with a pagan deity and Jesus. They're always capable of being civil, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that they're going to be best friends. They are best friends. Which, if you really have ever worked with Jesus, you know that he is absolutely a chaos deity, just in a different way, and the two of them together are just a recipe for disaster. It is so fun. He both causes and balances chaos in my life, and it's important to know that pagan gods are not perfect, and Loki is no exception. He makes mistakes in the myth all the time, and then tries to be held accountable for them, and that will happen in your practice. For example, with that spider, he was just trying to let me know that he's there. I panicked so much. He was like, oh, my bad. Okay, we won't do that again. I just recorded a bunch of clips and then realized my mic wasn't on. Cool! You can't film a video about Loki without having technical difficulties. Anywho, offerings, sweet things. Cookies, pastries, soda. Here's the thing. I always tell people, like, it differs from pantheon to pantheon, but in general, I feel like a lot of people feel bad when they can't give these, like, grandiose offerings to their deities, especially with some of the stuff that you might see on Witch Talk. You might feel bad if, all I have is this can of Mountain Dew. It's a very ordinary thing for us, but Mountain Dew did not exist 1,000 years ago. So to Loki, Or Asmodeus loves the raspberry lemonade Mountain Dew. Do they still sell that? Oh, and I love it too. But anyway, this is a very new and exciting thing for them. So don't feel bad. You're just having what you have, and really, it's the effort that counts. Now, I have it established with almost all of my deities, with the exception of Lady Hell, which we will get to in a moment. But with all of my other deities, when it comes to food offerings, what I'll do is I'll set it on the altar for a little while, and then I am allowed to eat it. And then I go into that a little bit more if you're curious about food offerings and offerings in general in the deity work guide. But let's get into Lady Hell. By this point, this was some time later. I had graduated college. I moved in with my boyfriend to our first apartment in Indianapolis, and I started getting bugs again. And I was like, Loki, hey, no, we said that this would not be a thing anymore. And he was like, that's not me. So divination, meditation, intuition came to the conclusion that it was Lady Hell. And I was very busy with lots of deities at the time. So she was just like, I just want a candle. I just want you to honor me. Just give me a candle, set it next to my dad's, and we'll be good. So that's what I did. And for a while, it was fine. I worked with Loki and would just light Lady Hell's candle. But you bet your ass, whenever that candle ran out, that I would get a bug again. Now, at the time, I was working with Cernunnos, and I need to make a video about him too at some point. But I was working with him, and Cernunnos has several aspects to him. I was more so working with him in his God of the Wild Things aspect. I firmly believe that he brought my cats to me. But he is also a psychopomp and has death deity aspects to him as well. So I knew that he was not going to be a permanent deity. He was with me for about a year. And so when he left, it was kind of agreed upon with the universe and all of my gods and whatnot that Lady Hell would then be stepping in as the death deity. Now, I do not consider myself a death witch or a death worker. And I went into a little bit more about death magic in general and the difference between death witch and death worker in a podcast episode that I did pretty recently. Check out the Tea Time Podcast with Spirituality on Spotify. But I don't necessarily consider myself by any of those titles. However, death in the world of magic and witchcraft and paganism tends to have different meanings than what you might think. Think of it like the Death Tarot card. If you pull that card, it doesn't mean that anyone's gonna die. It means like rebirth, renewal, the end or death of one cycle and the beginning of another, which is a theme that it's pretty much the entire meaning of Ragnarok and Loki's story. Death deities often help with death to bad habits or toxicity and just helping you to renew yourself. Shadow work is a big component if you haven't gathered. Hell also has a daughter named Hlodgunr, who I don't know much about, but I have her on my spreadsheet of forgotten deities when I want to do my next forgotten deities episode, so I will definitely include her at some point. Now, as I said, when it comes to food offerings with almost all of my deities, the agreement is that they have it for a time and then I can eat it. With any death deity, across the board, do not eat food that you give to death deities, because it is said if you do, it will bring death into your life and home, and not in a good way. A lot of times I just don't give her food offerings. I will light incense for her or an essential oil fragrance, things like that. If I do give her food, I'll put it outside afterwards. She does like moldy things, so obviously don't eat that. Keep out of reach of children and pets. She likes raw meat. Death deities are something else. But what about Loki and Hell together? Loki loves all of his children, and everything that he does is to avenge them, but Hell is his only daughter, so there is that kind of soft spot there. Hell is calm chaos, and Loki is wild chaos, which I know for Hell might not make sense. Like Loki, yeah, he is the wild one. He is very fast. I don't know how else to describe it. Just like zoom in all over the place. Chaos, loud, wild, in your face. And yes, he's very cunning and very sneaky. But Lady Hell definitely takes on that aspect more than the loud, in your face chaos. For example, I've heard of a lot of people meditating with her and they can kind of see Helheim in their mind's eye, or however you experience that while meditating. And she's very hospitable and will ask you if you would like something to eat, which we know you're not supposed to do, even in meditation with death deities. So that kind of chaos. Yeah. But with that said, Lady Hell is very sweet. She's very hospitable. In my experience, even though she's half dead, half alive, she's very beautiful. Which I'm sure has a purpose. Like, because if you wake up in the least favored afterlife, but you at least wake up to a pretty face, that's gotta help a little bit. You can truly feel the love between the two of them and that they embody towards their devotees. And they will definitely help you to start new things, build courage, to overcome trauma. Obviously, keep seeing your therapist, keep taking your meds. They will take that very seriously. Um, but just overall shaping you into being the best, toughest, and most badass version of yourself, and being capable of handling chaos when it comes to you. Loki will also cheer you up when you're sad. Um, Lady Hell is a great listener. They are really amazing deities to work with, and while I say there's no such thing as a good beginner friendly deity, for lack of better words, because Loki will approach beginners often, um, he is a decent beginner deity. There are several great resources about Loki out there. In fact, I'll put this in the description as well. I have a list of recommended books where if you go into I have them categorized, and I think if you go into my paganism category, that's where I have the Loki books. And the best part is, if you were to buy any of those books, you not only support me, but you can support a local bookstore in your area. So this is the altar that I have for them. Lady Hell's is a little bit more organized. I got a candle for her oracle deck, some jewelry, some oils. This box is where I keep all of the jewelry for her, actually. I've got a dish of olive oil that I used as an offering for her. This is some loose incense, lots of crystals, a cicada shell from last year. This is a protection ward, sort of a, what is it called? Transmutation ward, so that any negative energy sent to me will actually be transmuted into money, prosperity, beauty, what have you. These are some runes that I use for the both of them. For Lady Hell, I use the Talisman Oracle. It's very fun. I have this journal where I document all of my divination sessions with them. I normally have a bowl here, but it is in the dishwasher. Loki's side is a lot more cluttered, but he's been with me for a longer time, so I have more stuff for him. I use the Star Spinner Tarot for him. That's some granola. I have rune cards, little fox carving, lots of jewelry, lots of crystals. Yes, I have a can of silly string and a statue of him. But I mean, does this not just completely encapsulate his vibe? I think it does. That's going to be all for today, but remember, Loki is very complex and multifaceted, so if there's any questions you still have about him, let me know. I'd be happy to make a part 2 of this video. And like I said, I'll definitely be revisiting this as the time comes that I am to start working with the rest of his family. I'm telling you, if you want the most complex yet easy to understand biggest overview of Loki possible, go watch Ocean Keltoy's video. It will give you probably the best understanding of Loki from a mythological context, but hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea of what working with him is like. Like I said, let me know if you have any other questions or comments. If you work with Loki or Hell or both, let me know what your experience with them is like in the comments. And I will see you all next week for whatever I decide to do. Bye.